and low voltage for long battery life, et cetera, et cetera. And we'll be appearing at AWE with a suite of demonstrations about how we can apply metamaterial technology to AR applications. So absolutely delighted to join my colleagues here and look forward to this evening.
Great. So I believe that's everybody. And we're going to start with a sort of wide-ranging question, and I just encourage the panelists to, whoever starts first, leave space for answers, but also keep in mind that, we have a lot of folks here today, and we do want to leave time for questions at the end if possible. But I'm going to step aside from the engineering challenges at first and ask up front, what use cases do you all think are most likely to drive mass adoption of consumer AR glasses? And perhaps how wide-ranging or narrow do we expect that set of use cases to be once we reach that point? Will they be everything glasses by the time they become popular, or do you subscribe to the idea that more limited use cases might still drive that significant adoption early on? So whoever would like to start.
Matthew, I'd love to jump into this one. I really like the fact that you start with the use case and not with hardware. I know that we're here to talk about hardware, but really it's not a chicken and egg. First comes the use case, and the use case dictates how the hardware serves a purpose, which is providing this use case to the customer. It's not developing hardware and then figuring out the use case. And that was a little bit what happened in the early Google Glass days, because the use case wasn't very well defined, but the hardware was pretty well polished. So really, what is a use case? And today, especially in 2021, you saw Microsoft coming up with the concept of mesh, which is not an application, but which is really a platform over which mesh-enabled apps will be developed, flat apps, pixel apps, or scene apps. You saw Magic Leap touting the C3, which is, as I recall, communication, collaboration, and co-presence. And co-presence, this is really important, the sense of presence, the sense of the presence of another human being with you, although that human being might be thousands of miles away. And this is not replacing Zoom. This is really another era coming on, and I think this is what Facebook is trying to do with the concept of metaverse. Is really putting the human at the center and the sense of co-presence. We're yearning this sense of co-presence, and this is really important. We're social animals, and really Zoom is not giving us this, but the sense of co-presence is really important. So Facebook with metaverse, Microsoft with mesh, and I advise you to see some of the videos on YouTube with mesh, and also Magic Leap with C3. They're all going towards this generation of very realistic avatars to provide a sense of presence. And for me, that's the most important for consumer. I'm not talking about enterprise and defense. It's a complete different segment, and these are not the use cases for enterprise or defense, but really the use cases for consumer today for smart glasses.
Anybody else? I mean, I don't want to put anybody on the spot, but Jerry, I feel like Tilt 5 focuses on a very particular use case at this time, and on making that something that is accessible to first-time users who may have never even used VR or anything AR related before. But if you don't have thoughts at this time.
Sorry, I dropped off there for a minute. I was just trying to catch up on the context. But yeah, I agree with a lot of what Bernard was saying. It's all about the use case, but it also has to be about not boiling the ocean in one go. There's a lot of challenges in front of us, and companies that are trying to take on too much all at once, I believe, are going to struggle hitting it out of the park. And we've seen that historically with a lot of other industries. You go back and look at the home computer industry, you look at cell phones. The real standout companies, found a narrow vertical niche, and they just nailed it. And that's what we're working on, is we want to nail the in-home experience that brings people together and makes their lives better, right? We don't want to take them out of their existing lives. We want to enhance their lives. And so on the consumer side, success is going to be geared around early wins like that.
Anybody else, or should I move on to another question, which is sort of related? Speak now, or?
Well, my view philosophically is in total agreement. Clearly, the magic of immersion, as I used to call it, and this sense of presence is critical, and for especially interactive, as Bernard mentioned, consumer devices. I do think also, in a very practical sense, we're of an era now where, for various human circumstances, COVID, whatever, there's a tremendous drive to have accessible information devices. And I think that to the extent that we look at a one-stop shop where we go to the ultimate goal, I think there are plenty of derivative applications en route, which just provide very accessible information in a convivial way, maybe with limited interaction, and can do a very good job of telepresence with senior engineers that are on the go. They might be called a head-up display. They don't necessarily need to have ambient sensing, etc., but they perform an extremely important role in terms of providing accessibility. So I think that there's a gray scale and a number of iterations and applications that can be pursued, not just, everything fits one.
Got it. That actually, go ahead.
Yeah, so I would agree with Jonathan. I think that it's not necessarily just a use case driver as much as it is a use case form factor driver, right? So I worked for North for a period of time, the company that was recently acquired by Google. And if you take that first generation of glasses, which albeit maybe wasn't a commercially viable product, it was still a very exciting glimpse of the future where you could get basic information access and a form factor I think that most people felt was socially acceptable. It still needed to go a couple steps further before, if it looked like your glasses, let's say, then Matthew, then of course, I think that everyone could agree that that could be a commercially viable product. So it was close, but I think it's maybe a combination of factors, right? You have this utility experience and basic information access, like Jonathan said. And if you can get that in a form factor that looks like glasses, I think there's a very compelling, let's say, consumer application there. If it's more of a, let's call it a metaverse immersive experience, then maybe people are more willing to sacrifice some form factor to get such a novel experience, right? So I think it's a combination of different things. And like Jonathan said, it's kind of this iteration of different experiences and form factors, right, that can fulfill these. I wouldn't say there's just any one use case and there's not any one form factor, I guess is the way I would sum it up.
Got it.
Yeah,
well, let's.
I'd just like to say really quickly, it's hard for me to do a better summary of what our vision is of AR VR than Mark Zuckerberg's talk last week. So I'm not going to reference that too much, but I'll just second what everybody here said, is that telepresence is very important. We also believe that we, as was mentioned in the Facebook Connect speech, all-day wearable is important. And we think that is quite important in order for mass adoption. It's hard to do, but
I think I disagree a little bit on that. I think that mass adoption can come with shorter use cases, shorter run times. In our case, sitting around the table playing games with your friends for a few hours is, it could be the next video game console of the future. People are hungry for that type of experience. I don't think it's necessary that we have to make the quantum leap to walking around, completely immersed, or using it for, all our waking hours.
I agree with both of you. And in the sense that it has to be all day wearable. I need glasses. I need to wear glasses from the morning to the evening because I need a prescription correction, and prescription correction is always going to be part of a smart glass. Now, of course, the usage of smart glasses might be only 5% or 4% or even 2% of the time, but they have to be all day wearable, not all day usable. But the prescription part, and this is something that we talked with Zeiss Tools, and they did an amazing integration of the waveguide and the prescription in a same curved lens. This is very important. This is half of the population. Half of the population need prescription glasses, and it has to be wearable all day. But of course, use case might be only 5%.
Well, we should move on to another question, and the second one I had was basically covered by the panelists. So the goal of talking as little as possible on my part is already going quite well. So of the panelists here, what limitations of today's current spectrum of AR display technology do you think that consumers may need to grow to accept, or alternatively that need to be significantly improved first before we get to sort of mass appeal, mass market glasses, be that sort of resolution, the intensity of colors, brightness, casting light back onto your face, any of these sorts of things that we know are sort of, at least in some embodiments, the state of the technology today. What will consumers need to just sort of get used to versus what needs to be fixed first?
I think we have to fix the dork factor before people start going out, walking around in public. I think that's one of our biggest challenges for all-day wear AR devices.
This talks to what we talked about already before, is the social comfort. Social comfort. I'm very comfortable wearing these glasses, and I should be comfortable wearing smart glasses when the display is off and when the display is on. And as you know, in an overwhelming number of waveguide combiners, when the display is on, there's not only light that is propagated toward the eye, but also light that is propagated towards the world. And we call this front propagated light, or also eye glow. And this is a freak factor, which is really important in providing a socially comfortable smart glasses. So this is something that is very often overlooked by designers, because the glasses might look good when the display is off and might look kind of frightening when the display is on.
And I would say also, to add to that, it's the basic interaction with the display is also a key mechanism, right? How do you, I think that was probably the biggest pitfall of the first Google Glass, was the way that we tactilely interfaced with the display. I think there has to be some socially acceptable way of doing that without distracting the people right on the world side, the people that you're interacting with. So that's also a bit of a challenge, I think.
I wonder sometimes if there's a period of time that human beings, the human population, need to socialize a certain technology, live with it, so to speak, and understand it and not be intimidated by it. People could talk for hours about Google Glass and the various terms that people used to call people who wore the Google Glass. Which I won't go into, but at the same time, I remember in the early days of VR when we had these big clunky headsets, and we just could never imagine this could ever become a consumer product if you had to have this headset that people couldn't see your eyes any longer. And, we had to get that headset to be a pair of glasses. But in fact, VR does very nicely, and Facebook does an excellent job in executing on a beautiful wireless devices that provide great immersivity. And now people look at VR headset, oh, it's a VR headset. And to a certain extent, there's been a passage of time where that technology has been socialized. So notwithstanding, I'm totally all for all-day wearability and battery life that lasts forever, like the Apple Watch. But at the same time, I think sometimes there needs to be a passage of time for people to get associated with it, perhaps.
Yeah, we talked about social comfort and acceptability. Social comfort is important, but personal comfort by wearing glasses is important also, and invasion of privacy is important. Before we talked about generating realistic avatars. You can only generate realistic avatars if you scan your emotions. Your emotions is your mouth, your eyes, and your forehead, and a little bit other things. Now, this really has to be done in an inside-in architecture, not outside-in, as in the previous holoportation cases, but really inside-in. That means that you have sensors. You will have sensors on your smart glasses that will track your emotions. Much better than you can track your own emotions. That means that your glasses will know more about your emotions than yourself. And this is an amazing invasion of privacy, but this is the requirement to generate realistic avatars in real time. So think about this.
I just want to mention, as the material scientist, or one of the material scientists here on the panel, that it's going to be the new materials that are emerging that will make it possible to really shrink the bulky headsets that we have right now to more and more compact form factors. And this can include the beautiful photopolymers from Covestro, or new metamaterials coming online, where there's a true revolution going on now for about 20 years, where people are increasingly being able to compute and design optical metamaterials to perform new types of functions to allow more sustainable development. And all of this, well, it's still a process, but it's going to be slowly integrated in our eyewear and will make things look more fashionable and allow new types of functionality in terms of imaging and sensing to be incorporated. So I'm excited about this future.
I'm waiting for the day that someone comes up with the equivalent of Moore's law for optics. So we need an AR Moore's law equivalent so that we can predict forward.
I fully agree, because this is going to help direct investments and awareness of what can be done nowadays with all of the materials that are being produced. And yeah, we don't have that, and for sure the silicon semiconductor industry has notably benefited from this. I think we're challenged by the fact that our market still is moving into many directions, and we don't know yet, like in silicon electronics, that we want to scale things smaller and make things faster and more power efficient. Here, I think the opportunities still have not all been identified what we may be able to do. So it's very exciting, but then also challenging to develop a roadmap. But yeah, I think maybe some of the people here on this panel can comment further on that. I think
this is a very interesting question. There is no Moore's law in optics, but you can always go around. For example, I have seen many amazing developments in flat cameras that don't have a lens, where the phase mask is directly on top of the CMOS. So you don't really, that's not Moore's law, because the functionality is completely different. It's not an imaging functionality anymore, but it's still a sensor that might sense some information that is important. The other thing is, when I look at a pair of glasses, I see an amazing area which is in front, which are the lenses. Now, you can't really shrink optics, but you can multiplex different functionalities on transparent layers. And we saw this already a couple of months ago with Zeiss 2s. But imagine that you can put in sensors, transparent sensors, on top of a waveguide combiner, and also move part of the display engine optics into the waveguide. And this is all possible. It's not shrinking the optics, but it's making the amazing area that you have in front of your eyes more multifunctional, including combining display, imaging, and sensing, all in a transparent stack. But at the nanometric scale, of course, you have all these functionalities in there. So it's not reducing it, it's making a piece of transparent, a transparent device more multifunctional. And I think that's what we're going to see in the next years.
Our challenges always seem to come back to the combiner, for years and years. We make great optical engines to generate the images and sensors to sense the world around us, but to combine real world light and the computer generated light has always been really difficult and behind everything else.
Well, forgive me if I'm oversimplifying any of this, but one of the questions I have is, and I think maybe many or most of the panelists here would not say there are necessarily any missing pieces in the toolkit that could get us to all-day AR glasses. It's a matter of you sort of developing along the tracks that we've already discussed to this point to sort of get to there. But if you do consider there are, if you believe there's anything that we're in need of major breakthroughs to reach, I think one of the things that, and maybe this is just, I'm not fully up to date on the literature, that we still need is improvements in the technology for batteries, so that you can have not just a pair of glasses that is capable of doing all these wonderful things and having various sensors and other display components embedded in a transparent material, but that will work for longer than a couple hours before I have to take them off, put them in a charging case, put them back on again. But if there's anything else that anyone on the panel thinks, actually, when I go to the whiteboard, there's a big question mark as to what we put here to make this product. I'd love to hear about it.
I think innovations in emissive displays rather than conventional projection type displays, and here I speak about micro LEDs and full color micro LEDs with the requisite efficacy in efficiency to create an extremely bright and high resolution source, combined with efficiencies in the waveguide itself, such that that image can create an eye box and a very generous, high quality display. Those are two of the principal challenges, to Jerry's point about the overall trajectory, if you like, of the waveguide combiner in AR displays. And so fundamentally, there are innovations that could have a step function to accelerate this near term. They are on the horizon, obviously being extremely well funded, but perhaps those will constitute the key steps to really accelerate things, and therefore higher efficiency, longer battery life, and get to that criticality of all-day use like the Apple Watch was before it really took off in terms of its proliferation as a consumer category device.
Ultimately, I think some of the challenges like batteries can be solved in non-offensive ways for the end user. Processing can be moved off the headset. Those can be some interim steps that can be done, that can be as, less intrusive as a set of earbuds that we use all the time. And, over time, those will evolve and, end up on the headset again.
Apologies for my little hand gestures there. It seems we had a small issue with muting, and I wanted to make sure, Eric, I see Eric has been able to unmute. I think you had something you wanted to contribute either in response to my question earlier.
I wanted to say something. It's like, no, you're muted. You can't talk. It's just like, okay, I won't talk then. I see it as a, as a swap space problem, size, weight, power, swap C. And that's not just one thing, right? Size, weight, power, like it's not a binary thing. We have to work on all of those things simultaneously. It's a very, very challenging, difficult problem. I'm sure everybody here knows.
Anybody else at this time? And also, I want to make sure that all of our panelists are able to unmute before we move forward.
Bernard's not.
I'm unmuted now. I can unmute myself now. Thank you. Yeah, no, I totally agree with what you said. And battery life is a holy grail with communication also. Micro LED seems to be the hottest display architecture out there, but it's not quite ready. Today we see only single color micro LED panels, and the resolution is not that great. The efficiency in the green might be okay, but in the red might not be quite there. So there's still a lot of work to be done on the micro LED side. But what is interesting is you actually don't need RGB micro LED panels in order to have a RGB immersion experience with waveguide combiners. You can actually use 3 different panels, either in an X-Cube configuration or even with 3 different in-couplers in in a nicely designed waveguides. Also, if you don't have the resolution, you can use a wobulator, as Digilance showed last month at our fireside chat, and how to increase the resolution in the time domain when in space you don't have that resolution yet. So that's what Jonathan was referring to, bridging this gap between what we have today and what we have tomorrow by thinking outside the box and really increasing the color and the resolution in other ways than just making more pixels smaller in a smaller size.
Yeah, at Tilt 5, we turned our optical problem inside out. We actually use a retroreflective display that you put, or board you put on the table, and the images show up on the board to solve some of these problems to get a consumer grade product out faster. So just bypassing having to solve some of these tough problems. And I think we're going to see XR devices of that nature, springing up and solving tough problems in, vertical markets, from now until the ultimate, when we can walk around with our, perfectly immersive AR glasses.
I just want to note here that I guess new materials also here are making great advances. I guess with Samsung, we've developed an ultra high density display using metamaterials by patterning the electrodes that inject charge in the light emitting pixels. By patterning the metallic electrodes with metamaterials, we've been able to extract more light and achieve higher color purity, and achieve now pixels that are truly approaching the wavelength of light, sort of on the 1 micron, 100th of a hair size. So there's advances there, and new things that have been possible but are on the horizon is the multifunctionality that Bernard Kress mentioned. We can now achieve multiple functions. We can manipulate in one piece of optics multiple wavelength of light or polarization states differently, which was not possible with a conventional lens, where there's only one and the same function for all the wavelength and polarization states of light. And most recently, there have been suggestions, although this still needs more development, how to compress free space with an optical coating. So one of the big challenges is not only trying to make the lenses more compact, but bring lenses closer together to make optical systems. And as Bernard Kress has pointed out, some of the possibilities then to reduce cost, not by just shrinking the optical elements, but by making more integrated systems, will become extremely important. And at the same time, I guess every material solves a different problem. There are the beautiful photopolymers from Covestro, where materials become more sustainable and start to manipulate multiple wavelengths in new ways. So I think it'll be a very interesting multi-material approach to try and solve all of the challenges we're facing right now.
Yeah, I think to add to that, it's I think in the near future will be a lot of exciting practical demonstrations of these types of different combiner technologies. I mean, even for us, for people that are familiar with our technology, I mean, traditionally we approached it as this web coated or coated film technology, which had this material thickness range and a performance metric that a lot of people are keen to focus on, average refractive index modulation. And this is something that can translate directly into field of view. But what we've now done differently, or added, I should say, is we have a liquid supply form now. So this gives one the ability to have much thicker photopolymer layers, where this performance metric, average refractive index modulation isn't necessarily the most important factor. And I think now, especially, some of you may be familiar with this framework that we're building with metamaterials for a one-stop shop. But this type of thing will allow us, by extension, to extend our team. So, we can find or build a linkage in the value chain as a component maker for these, materials and these lenses and light guides and such, but also allow us the opportunity to focus on more of these advanced demonstrations of this large, really performance, parameter space that we have with the material, and that's been something that's it could take a bit of effort to do that, just because there's so many different ways from an optical architecture perspective that you can approach this. And there's so many different variations of the material that one could use. Demonstrating the full potential of the technology is something that we're very excited to do in the near future.
I do want to make sure that we try to leave some time for a question or two from the audience at the end here, but I do have sort of one last one to end on. And this, I think, again, relates to the spectrum of what we've been talking about with new materials or sort of production-ready advancements that we'll see in products within the next 2-3 years. But Avi Bar-Zeev, who has worked for a number of companies in this space for quite a long time, done work with Apple, Microsoft, Disney, recently wrote a blog post sort of keying off of the release of Facebook's Ray-Ban Stories glasses, which are not full AR glasses, but they have cameras that allow you to take pictures, sort of hands-free pictures and video. And of course, in so many embodiments of VR tech today in particular, you use cameras, even low resolution black and white ones, in order to do spatial tracking, to know where the glasses are in the environment and display information correctly to the viewer. And Avi was pushing back on this idea that we need to use cameras as the main sensors to drive this because of the associated privacy concerns. If you always need these on, regardless of how that data is supposed to be handled, it sort of presents this risk of that, very rich visual data being mishandled in some way. And I'm curious to hear from this group, when we're talking about, we've already sort of touched on the basis of maybe there are AR glasses that aren't all day, all the time used, but are all day wearable and are useful in other ways. But I'm curious to hear your thoughts on this central problem of the sensors required to enable what these devices do versus the sensor tech that we have available to us today that seems the most practical, but then might invite these sorts of concerns. Of course, and I'll put my own sort of take on this out there, which is that, of course, if we can sort of sit here and imagine a perfect sensor that could replace a camera by giving us all the relevant information we need at the same, it may in that sense just be similar to a camera. It may not be visual information, but you may be able to still glean the same sort of sensitive information that you're worried about in the first place. And then we're back to square one. So I'd love to be proven wrong on that point or given some other way to think about it, especially with regards to technology that you're actually, you yourselves are working on.
Oh, you're muted, Bernard.
Oh, are we? There we go.
Yeah, I tried to unmute myself for the past 10 minutes, but not possible. Thank you for unmuting me. Yeah, no, sensors are a key aspects, not only the display and the combiner, the display engine, the combiner, but it's also the sensor and the communication, of course. Is it going to be a thin client directly to the cloud with 5G, or does it have a companion phone? This changes completely the story, and we know that Apple will have a companion phone. Of course, that makes a lot of sense for a company like Apple. Doesn't make too much sense for companies who don't produce cell phones. But going back to the sensors, the first thing that I said is multifunctionality. The largest area is in front of your eyes, and this is also the area that can dissipate the most energy. You can only dissipate about 2 watts on a smart glass. That's it. And you really want to put it where you can dissipate the energy the most. And having transparent sensors. There was a paper by University of Arizona how an eye tracker can actually be made in a waveguide at SPIE. I would like to point this paper out. It was really great. It was last month, and really a lot of sensors can be integrated in a transparent periscope way or in other transparent ways on the combiner without interacting with the with the digital combiner functionality. So why do we need more sensors? Well, we talked about co-presence and generating avatars. So of course you need 6 DoF head tracking. That's for sure for world-locked holograms. You need gesture sensing, and that's a given also. So are these cameras or the different sensors? They don't need to be optical. They don't need. There's many other ways to implement gesture sensors, and eye trackers are interesting. Are they needed for smart glasses? Well, the question is out there. But if you want to have realistic avatars, you need face trackers. Trackers that can track your mouth, your eyes, and even your forehead, and maybe even do iris recognition. Well, these can be stealth transparent sensors made out of a waveguide or something different, where metamaterials can help a lot, or can be non-optical but still transparent. And I think there's a lot of things that metamaterials can actually provide there. So really stop thinking about the cameras everywhere, because they're going to consume way too much energy, and they're going to be really bulky, even miniature cameras. But think about new ways to integrate stealth imaging in a transparent piece of glass, not only by having flat cameras without lenses, but cameras that have relays, maybe transparent waveguide relays, as has been shown by the University of Arizona recently.
I think it all boils down to trusted control of your data. Yeah, I think Matthew hit on this. Like, it doesn't matter what ingenious sensor we make. You'll be surprised how people can abuse that, or companies can abuse that. We see news stories about that all the time from social media companies using IMUs and your Wi-Fi IDs to associate you with your friends and what you're doing. And if we want that to remain private in the future, we'll have to establish control of how our AR devices are transmitting and sharing that data to the universe.
So it's a critical trade-off between utility and usefulness, and the threshold that people are prepared to pay, in terms of letting their data go. Amazon Echo, everybody's being listened into, but do you care if it's useful and can play your music and can switch on all your lights nicely? Whether you go to passport control and everybody's being biometrically scanned in their eyes, and all that biometric data is being held now to the extent that you don't even have to go through any physical human passport adjudication. So I guess to a certain extent, there's that critical balance between utility and what it's worth in terms of concern about, But to earlier Bernard's point, building those sensors into the actual material itself and creating highly responsive analog sensors that aren't just a general purpose camera. In fact, I worked on eye trackers for the US Air Force, where we did exactly that. Very simple, machine learning type driven light sensors that were doing purely one thing, measuring the Purkinje reflection from the eyeball to do effective eye tracking. And there we're kind of rethinking inside out the whole sensor and the tight integration of what was a very simple light point sensor, but distributed around the waveguide. So it became in itself a new type of sensor for that particular anatomical sensoring.
Now, I know we're very close to the end here, and I would invite the AWE digital team, if you have a certain way that you like to solicit questions from the audience, to weigh in. If that's raising hands or putting it in the chat, let me know. But I do see one here from Lou Panizzi that I do think is worth addressing, because it's something that I've looked into recently and haven't had the chance to tackle in my newsletter. Lou asks, would it be possible to digitally change the prescription of the glasses or make the prescription digital instead of the glass? Which I think is a way of asking, we're talking about waveguides, we're talking about polymers and other things that we're doing for this sort of optical tech stack in these glasses. And I know that there are companies looking into what if anybody could take, a pair of glasses stock off the shelf and then it just adjusts automatically to the needs of their eyes. And I'd be curious to hear more from the folks on the panel here who are working actively on that or know about that sort of step forward for just vision correction with sort of this AR adjacent tech. Bernard is muted again. There we go.
Yeah, for some reason I cannot unmute myself. You have to unmute me. Yeah, auto refraction compensation is a holy grail, not only for AR but for the entire eyewear industry. Since 20 years now, there have been many companies, that have risen and fallen in the past 2 decades, providing, tunable prescription integrating only diopter, but also maybe astigmatism and maybe even progressive or bifocals. And this is the market for tunable prescription for AR is only a drop in the bucket compared to the regular market for a tunable prescription. I can think about companies like Pixel Optic about 10 years ago, but also other companies today, such as companies that are making tunable liquid filled lenses, such as AdLens in the UK or Optotune in Switzerland. Well, it's the real reliability aspects that are linked to fluid tunable lenses. LC lenses, interesting alternative. I can think about companies such as Deep Optic in Israel, or Moro which is a spin-off of IMEC in Belgium. They're all working on very exciting ways to provide this tunable prescription, which is really important. But you have to remember that if you have prescription in a pair of glasses, your pair of glasses are a class 1 medical device, and you have to register them, and you have to have a quality management system internally for hardware. You can't just sell this. That's why I think when I got my Ray-Ban stories, I got them from the Ray-Ban website. There was no mention whatsoever of Facebook in the entire purchase process of Ray-Ban stories, and there's a reason for it. HIPAA laws in the US, and also you can't just send over the mail a medical device if you're not a company that can do so. And these laws are changing from state to state in the US and also from country to country. So it's very difficult, when you get into the prescription correction realm. You have to be very cautious with all the regulatory and the legal implications.
I was really excited a few years ago when the AWE team had the tagline "Superpowers to the People" or something along those lines. Beyond just improving your vision, bringing it up to 2020, there's an exciting world in front of us where we actually have superpowers delivered by our AR glasses. Why can't we see heat? Why can't we see better? Can't have zooming capabilities, things like that. So that in the future will be a very large market, augmenting and greatly improving people's vision, outside of all the immersive stuff that we're excited about today.
Yeah, maybe I can mention that, well, in the lab, we're working on dynamic meta surfaces where we can make lenses and optical elements that steer beams that are completely flat. But there's still a long way to go to integrate this into eyewear, get rid of all of the undesired reflections, to make anti-reflection coatings for metamaterials to correct all of the aberrations. So I wanted to make the pitch that I guess as a university, it's great to see now that many universities are starting to educate students in the art of nanophotonics and new materials for optics. And I think these panels and discussions are really bringing attention to this field more and more, and students are extremely savvy in finding the right fields to work in. So right now I have a specialty course on nanoscale photonics at Stanford, and more than 30 students now show up for this course. So I just want to stress, to solve these really challenging problems, we have to invest in educating the next generation of people that are going to help us design all of this. And I guess many companies, I think, hopefully will hire some of our students to start working on this.
Where do you have Mark?
I know, thank you. You've taken all of our best people.
Well, I do believe we are at the end of the allotted time here. Apologies for everybody who was asking questions that we didn't have time to go through. The panel, of course, I had to do very little in terms of prompting to have you all talk about this topic intelligently and in a, I think, really accessible way. If there are any pressing questions that the audience has, I do encourage them. I mean, my email is on my Twitter profile. It's at Matthew Olson, and then I do my newsletter. I can try to ask at some point down the road, either at AWE next week or subsequent events, questions to anybody here. So as moderator, I'd like to thank all the panelists today for taking their time. And of course, I was not the one organizing this from the get-go. I was enlisted as well. So thank you to AWE for having me and for putting on this panel. Anybody else have closing statements, or I want to also leave room for the organizers to say anything here at the end. So so go ahead.
Thank you so much for everyone for being here today. It was an absolute pleasure. And yeah, no more comments for us. We look forward to seeing you at AWE USA just a short week from now, and feel free to join other future on-nights. You can reach us at awexr.com or on our various social channels. Again, thank you to our panelists. Thank you to Meta for sponsoring today and allowing us to have this conversation. And we look forward to having more of these conversations in the coming months.
All right, I got one thing I'd like to add. Metamaterials to the moon.
Yes, metamaterials, man. Thank you very much, everyone, and have a wonderful day.
Take care, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Nice.
Bye, everybody. Bye-bye.